This is lesson 3 of the PPL ground lesson series, the air experience. This is officially your first flight. Everything up to now, the cockpit familiarization, the emergency drills, the walkarounds, the paperwork, it was all building up to this very moment. Today you leave the ground and experience what it feels like to fly. So let's talk about what's going to happen, what you might feel, and how to get out the absolute most out of your first time in the air. The flight itself is around 30 minutes, with 30 minutes of pre-flight briefing and 30 minutes of debrief either side. Let's go. My name is Sami. I'm a commercial pilot looking for my first flying job, as well as training to become a flight instructor. And this is lesson 3 of a full private pilot license ground lesson series. The main aim of today's lesson is to introduce the sensations of flying and to recognize ground features when seen from the air. But here's what that really means in practice. Your instructor's job today is to make sure you step out of that aircraft thinking, I can absolutely learn to do this. And that's it. To build a confidence, to evoke enjoyment, and to create curiosity. Those are the outcomes that matter most on this flight. You will not be taught how to fly today, but you will begin to understand what flying feels like. And that understanding is the foundation everything else is built upon. Before you get in the aircraft, your instructor will run through a focused pre-flight briefing. Don't tune out, this is important. Safety in and around the aircraft. You've covered some of this in lesson 1, but there's no harm in going over it again. Your instructor will brief you on entry and exit from the aircraft, how to get in safely, what to avoid, where not to step, especially on the wing, propeller awareness. Treat it as it's always moving. Live engine. Even when it's stopped, seatbelt fit and adjustment. Check properly, not just clipped in. Seat height adjustment. You need to be able to see clearly. Headset connection and usage. How to communicate with your instructor in the air. Emergency brief. Every flight starts with an emergency brief. Your instructor will cover emergency brace position, what it is and when to use it. Egress procedure. How to get out of the aircraft as soon as possible if you need to. Sick bag. Yes, it's in the briefing. Motion sickness is completely normal, especially on early flights. There is zero shame in using it. Your instructor has seen it many times. I'll be honest, I've used it myself a fair few times during my upset UPRT, upset prevention recovery training, flying upside down and pulling G-forces. Ventilation, how to adjust airflow in the cockpit if you feel unwell. The do's and don'ts. Your instructor will also give you the ground rules for the flight. Things you can do, such as ask questions, look around, tell your instructor how you're feeling. Keep your hands and feet near but lightly on the controls. Plus, if you're invited to follow through, don't make any sudden inputs on the controls without being asked to. Don't suffer in silence. If you feel unwell, say something early. This gives the instructor a chance to give you a sick bag, fly at normal attitudes, and head back straight direct to base. The sortie profile. Finally, your instructor will walk you through what's going to happen at each stage of the flight. The departure, the local flying area, what they'll show you, and the return, so you'll know what's coming. Once you're strapped in, engines running, it's time for taxi and takeoff. Your instructor handles everything at this stage. Watch and listen. Notice the way they check the instruments. Listen to the radio. Position the aircraft. You're absorbing everything even when you're not formally learning. Then comes the takeoff roll. And if this is your first time, here's what to do or what to expect. The engine power comes in. The noise increases. The aircraft accelerates down the runway faster than what you might expect. And then there's that moment. The noise lifts slightly. The vibration from the ground stops and you're flying. That moment is very different for everyone. Some people laugh, some people go very quiet, some can't stop grinning. Whatever you feel, it's the right thing to feel. I tend to just say Subhanallah in the air. Once you're clear of the airfield and climbing, your instructor will begin to familiarize you with the aircraft in motion. This isn't instruction, it's a demonstration. They'll show you aircraft stability, how the aircraft naturally wants to fly level. It's not as unstable as you might imagine. The horizon is your primary reference. In visual flying, the horizon tells you everything about your attitude. Basic attitude changes, gentle climbs, descents, turns, demonstrated by your instructor, so you can watch the controls move and feel the aircraft respond. Pay attention to the sensation. The way the aircraft feels different when the power changes, the slight pressure in your seat during a turn, the way the nose tracks the horizon. You're building an internal library of sensation that will become the foundation of your flying instincts. Your instructor will point out local landmarks such as roads, towns, rivers, the airfield itself. This serves a specific purpose. You're learning to read the ground from the air. Everything looks very different from 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet. Roads you drive every day become thin grey lines. Towns become clusters of rooftops. The airfield, which felt huge on the ground, looks surprisingly small from 3,000, 5,000 feet. This is the beginning of your visual navigation awareness, a skill that becomes critical in later exercises. If the flight is going well and you're comfortable with your instructor will hand the controls to you briefly. When that happens, here's the briefing you'll get. I have controls, now you have control. Just move them gently and see what happens. This is a flying instruction, but for you, for now, it's exploration. Move the control column slightly left, feel the aircraft bank to the left, pull back gently, feel the aircraft nose rise, push forward, and you'll see the nose dive. You're not trying to do anything specific, you're just feeling what's possible. The key word here is gentle, small inputs. The aircraft is very sensitive. You'll be surprised how little it takes. Your instructor has their hands on near the controls the entire time, just in case. So just explore. If you feel unwell, let's talk about motion sickness, because it's more common in early flights than most people expect, and no one should feel embarrassed about it. If you start to feel nauseous or uncomfortable or simply just off, tell your instructor immediately. Don't wait. Don't hope it passes. Say something. Your instructor will adjust the ventilation in the cockpit, reduce any maneuvering, return to the airfield if necessary. Motion sickness in early training is not a sign that you can't fly. It's a sign that your body hasn't adapted yet. Most students who experience it in early lessons go on to complete their training with that being a factor. It's one of those things, it just gets better with experience and time. Your instructor will handle the landing entirely. Watch the approach. Notice how they manage the speed, the power, the descent rate. You don't need to understand it technically just yet. So simply just observe. After landing and shutdown, you'll head inside for the post-flight debrief. The debrief for lesson 3 is deliberately low-key. Your instructor will ask you, how did you feel? Not just physically, but the whole experience. What did you notice in terms of landmarks, the view, the sounds, whether you have any questions, and there should be plenty. This is also the moment your instructor begins to understand you as a student, as an individual, your temperament, how you respond to new environments, whether nervousness affects you and in what way. They won't tell you this, but they're building a picture of how to teach you most effectively going forward. One important note, if the first flight was nerve-wracking or overwhelming, don't let that define your assessment of yourself as a pilot. This was the most unfamiliar, novel, sensory overloaded experience you will ever have in a cockpit. After this, you'll get used to it. It gets calmer, it gets more familiar over time. That's exactly what training is for. The instructors from lesson 3 say something worth quoting directly. This is likely to be the student's first ever flight in most cases, and as such will be remembered for their lifetime. I thought, wow, subhanallah, that's so beautiful, because I can still remember my very first flight. Your instructor knows this. Their goal from the moment you walk to the aircraft to the moment you walk back is to make sure you leave believing this is achievable for you. It's possible. So here's what your instructor is assessing you on. It's worth knowing during your lesson 3, the instructor is quietly making an initial assessment of how you respond to the environments. Your instructor is quietly making an initial assessment of how you respond to the environment, your natural temperament under novel stress, how you handle sensory overload, whether nervousness presents as excitement or anxiety. But, and this is very important, they won't draw firm conclusions from this flight alone. If you're nervous or quiet or overwhelmed, that is completely expected and is completely normal. This is your first flight. The instructor has seen every reaction imaginable. None of them can predict whether you'll be a good pilot or not. After your first flight, here's what to do. Write down everything you remember, what you saw, how you felt, what surprised you, what you want to understand better. That record, however informal, becomes your first piece of pilot self-awareness. And self-awareness is alone one of the most valuable things a pilot can develop early on. What you measure gets tracked. To wrap up, after this lesson, you should have completed your first flight in a light aircraft, been introduced to the sensations of flight, noise, movement, pressure, the view, begun to recognize ground features from the air, had a basic feel of the controls, understood the pre-flight safety brief in a real context, left the aircraft knowing that learning to fly is completely attainable. That last one matters most. Coming up next is lesson 4, effects of control. This is where the actual flying instruction begins. You learn what each control surface does and how to select and hold an attitude. How to trim the aircraft is the first lesson where you are actually flying. So please subscribe, drop a comment, especially if you've just done your first flight and want to share what it's like. Until next time, blue skies, Sami's fly.